Welcome back, dark hearts and the misunderstood. You're safe here and you deserve rest too. Let go of your worries, troubles, and pain. You're safe in my shadow. I'll take care of you. We'll be exploring another immersive and cozy story, but instead of being the hero, we'll be exploring the villain, the anti-hero, or the morally grey. Tonight, you will be in the shoes of the Ash Walker, a woman who cannot die, a woman who has survived for centuries, not because she is strong, not because she is blessed, not because some god chose her for greatness. She survives because something else dies in her place. A stranger, an animal, something small and innocent and undeserving. And every time she should have left this world, the world took something else instead. She did not ask for this. She has never asked for anything. She just wanted to say goodbye to her mother a long, long time ago. Now the world fears her, hates her, blames her for every death that falls in her shadow. And tonight, exhausted, ancient, and bone-tired in a way that sleep cannot touch, she walks into a village that is slowly being swallowed by an unnatural winter. She knows she should keep walking. She never does. Take a slow breath in and let it go. You're not the hero tonight, but maybe that's okay. Maybe the hero was never the one who needed the rest. The road is old, not old in the way that cobblestones are old, worn smooth by feet and cartwheels and the passage of merchant seasons. This road is old in the way that forgotten things are old, in the way that grief is old, in the way a scar is old, carrying within its texture the full memory of everything that made it. It is a dirt road, or it was once. Now it is mostly frost, the kind of frost that does not melt at midday, the kind that settles into the ground like it has made a decision, like it belongs here now, and the earth simply has to adjust. She walks it alone. She always walks alone. She has been walking alone for so long that the solitude no longer feels like an absence, it feels like a companion, a quiet one, the kind that doesn't ask questions. Her name, the one she was born with, she stopped using it decades ago. Names are for people who belong somewhere. Names are for people who are expected somewhere, who are missed when they leave, who leave a shape in the air where they used to be. She left that kind of life behind so long ago that she can barely recall the shape of it. She remembers the feeling of it, the way you remember warmth after a fire has gone cold, as a quality of the air, as an impression in the body, as something your skin still reaches for, even when it knows there's nothing there. People call her different things in different places. The undying woman, the curse walker, the pale stranger, the one who brings death without dying. Most of the names are accusations more than titles. She has stopped flinching at them. But in the oldest records, in the monastery scrolls that no longer circulate, in the margins of histories that have been quietly burned by nervous kingdoms, she is called the Ash Walker, the one who walks through the ash of everything she survives. She thinks it is the most honest name she has ever been given. She's wearing a heavy traveling cloak, dark grey and worn at the hem, the kind of garment that has been repaired so many times that it is more patch than original cloth. Beneath it, layered wool and leather, boots that have been resoled twice in the last year. She carries a pack on her back, modest, efficient, the luggage of someone who does not expect to stay anywhere long enough to unpack. She carries a short blade at her hip, more tool than weapon, the kind of knife you use to cut rope and slice bread and occasionally, reluctantly, defend yourself with. She is not a fighter. She has never needed to be. Death has never been able to catch her. And most people who want her dead are smart enough to realize eventually that wanting her dead is a poor strategy. Killing her only kills something else. The sky above the road is the color of old pewter, heavy, low, pressing down toward the tree line like it is tired of holding itself up. The trees on either side of the road are pine and bare ash and something older, gnarled, pale-barked, leafless in a way that feels permanent rather than seasonal. Their branches reach across the road above her like fingers laced together, like a ceiling made of bones. She has been walking for 3 days. She has not spoken to anyone in 11 days, since she left the town of Calver's Crossing, where a miller's dog had died the same morning. She'd slipped on ice near the river and cracked her head on a stone hard enough to kill anyone else. She had woken up with a headache. The dog had not woken up at all. The miller had seen. They always see. She had left before the shouting started. Now the road winds through a valley she does not have a name for. Low hills on either side, a frozen creek running somewhere to her left, audible but invisible beneath its shell of ice. The cold is not merely cold, it is purposeful. It presses against her with an intention that ordinary winter doesn't carry. Ordinary winter is indifferent. This cold has opinions. She notices it the way she notices most things, quietly, without alarm, filing it away in the part of herself that has been cataloguing wrongness for 200 years. Something is not right about this valley. Something has been not right for longer than a season. She keeps walking. The road crests a small rise and she stops. Below her, in a bowl of land cupped between 2 hillsides, is a village. It is small. 20 buildings, perhaps 25. A mill near the frozen creek, a tavern with a light in the window, a chapel with a dark window, houses clustered together like animals trying to keep warm, smoke rising from chimneys, thin, pale smoke, the smoke of fires that are working hard and not quite winning, and snow. Everywhere, snow. Too much snow for the season, too deep, too settled, too white and clean in a way that beautiful things sometimes are when they are also dangerous. The drifts are piled against the buildings to window height in places. The paths between houses are carved like tunnels. She stands on the rise and looks at the village and does the thing she always does in these moments. She argues with herself. "Keep walking," says one part of her. The part that has been walking for 200 years. The part that knows what happens when she stops. The part that has sat with the arithmetic long enough to know that proximity to her is a tax that the world charges to everyone around her. "But look at it," says the other part. The part she cannot seem to kill no matter how many centuries she tries. Look at those thin ribbons of smoke. Look at how hard those fires are working. Look at how deep that snow is for a season. That should not have produced it. Something is wrong here. Something is wrong here. And you are the only one on this road, and you have seen enough wrong things to know what they grow into if no one stops. She stands on the rise for a long time. The wind moves through the pale bark trees. The frozen creek makes a sound beneath its ice, a low, pressured groan like something alive and trapped. She adjusts her pack on her shoulders. She walks down toward the village. She always does. The village is called Varenholm. She learns this from the post at the edge of the road. A wooden sign, hand-carved, the letters deep and deliberate. Below the name of the village, someone has added something in a different hand, fresher carving, the letters more urgent. Travelers, We cannot offer hospitality. Continue on. She reads it twice, then she walks past it. The snow on the main path through the village has been packed down by feet and effort into something passable. But it is the packed down snow of people who are very tired of packing it down. The effort shows. The ice at the edges is grey and thick. The drifts on either side are taller than she is, carved with the grooves of shovels, the labour visible in every wall of snow like rings in a tree. The first person she sees is a boy, perhaps 9 years old, perhaps 10. He is bundled so thoroughly that only his eyes are visible above his scarf, and those eyes are watching her from the gap between two buildings with an alertness that is not curiosity, it is assessment. The look of a child who has been told to watch for strangers and report them. She raises a hand to him in greeting. He disappears between the buildings like smoke. She keeps walking. The tavern is called the Barrow Sign. It is a low building, long, with a covered porch where firewood is stacked in neat rows that go up past the roof line. More firewood than she has ever seen outside a professional lumber operation. The kind of supply you build when you are not sure the winter has a bottom. The light she had seen from the rise is coming from a window beside the door, warm and yellow and slightly hazy, the light of a fire in a contained space full of people. She pushes open the door. The sound is the first thing. A low murmur of conversation that stops the moment the cold air follows her inside. 8 faces turn toward her. She counts them without making it obvious. The way she has learned to count rooms and exits and potential problems over 2 centuries of walking into places she was not wanted. A man behind the bar, broad, middle-aged, with the permanently tense jaw of someone who's been worrying for so long it has become structural. 2 old men at a table near the fire with cups of something hot between them. A woman knitting in the corner, needles paused mid-stitch. 3 younger men near the back, the kind of young men who are useful in emergencies and also in fights, watching her with the particular attention of people who have recently been called upon for both. A girl, perhaps 16, sweeping near the hearth, who has gone very still, and a woman, sitting alone at a table near the window. This woman is the one the Ashwalker's eyes find and stay on, because she is the one who does not stop what she is doing when the door opens. She is reading a book, actual paper, which is not common out here. And she continues reading for 4 full seconds after the door opens, which in a room where everyone else has frozen is either extraordinary confidence or extraordinary distraction. Then she looks up. She's perhaps 50, grey-haired, close-cropped, with a face that has been lived in rather than merely aged. The kind of face that collects experience rather than damage. She's wearing a healer's cord around her wrist, faded blue, the kind that marks a practitioner of the old herbal traditions. Her eyes are dark and steady, and when she looks at the Ashwalker, there is no fear in them. There is recognition, not the recognition of having met before, the recognition of having understood something. The man behind the bar speaks first. "We put a sign up," he says. His voice is not hostile. It is tired. "At the road." "I saw it," the Ashwalker says. "Then you know we can't." "I'm not asking for hospitality," she says. "I'm asking for information, and I'll pay for it." She takes a coin from her coat and sets it on the nearest table. A silver, more than a meal, more than 2 meals. The room re-evaluates her in the particular way rooms re-evaluate strangers when money appears. The man behind the bar looks at the coin, looks at her, Something in him settles, not warmly, but practically. "Sit down," he says. "I'll get you something hot." She sits. The woman with the book is still watching her. The man's name is Osbert. He runs the tavern and has run it for 20 years, and he speaks about the village the way people speak about something they love that is currently in the process of dying, with precision and grief and a kind of stubborn insistence on the facts that is the last wall between despair and acceptance. The winter, he tells her, started in the 9th month. Not unusual, she says. The 9th month can turn cold. Not like this, he says. Not overnight. Not with 3 feet of snow in a single night that the sky dropped like it was clearing out a storage room. Not with temperatures that do not rise. Not with livestock dying in their stalls despite extra bedding and extra heat. Not with a creek that freezes solid enough to walk on by the 10th month. She listens. She's good at listening. She has had 200 years to practice. The winter killed the harvest, what they had stored. Not enough. They sent a rider to the nearest town, a place called Durnwall, 12 miles south, for supplies. The rider came back 3 days later. The road was impassable. There was a drift across the southern pass, not a natural drift, he said. Shaped wrong, solid wrong, like a wall that had been placed there rather than accumulated. She leans forward slightly at that. Shaped wrong. How? Osber shakes his head. Not the shake of someone who doesn't know, the shake of someone who doesn't want to say. Wrong, he says again. The rider said it felt wrong, like something didn't want us to leave. She wraps her hands around the cup the girl brought her. Something herbed and hot, not quite tea, not quite broth, the kind of drink that exists in the space between nourishment and medicine. She thinks about the cold outside, the purposeful cold, the cold with opinions. Have there been any deaths? She asks. The room goes quiet in a different way than it was quiet before. The quality of the silence changes. It is Osbert who answers, but slowly. 3. Since the winter started. How? Cold. Or what looked like cold. He pauses. Old Petra. She was 90. She just didn't wake up one morning. We thought it was natural. A pause. Then the Aldrin boy, 14. He went out to check the animal traps and didn't come back. We found him in the tree line, sitting against a tree like he'd decided to rest. No marks on him, no sign of a struggle, just stopped. And the 3rd. Another pause, longer. My wife, Osbert says. The room is very quiet. I'm sorry, the Ashwalker says, and she means it. The way you mean things when you have heard them enough times that they bypass the parts of you that have gone numb and reach the parts that are still, somehow, soft. She was healthy, he says, 44 years old. She was healthy and she went to sleep and she didn't. He stops, picks up a cloth and wipes at the bar with a pointless thoroughness. Didn't wake up. The Ashwalker looks down at her cup. 3 deaths, unnatural winter, a blocked road, animals dying, and a cold that feels like a decision. She knows what this is, not specifically. She does not know the name or the shape of it yet, but she knows the category. She has seen this before, in different forms, in different centuries. The world has things in it that feed on warmth, on life, on the particular heat that living things generate simply by persisting. And occasionally, one of those things finds a place that is isolated enough, contained enough, small enough to swallow. Varenholm is very small. She could leave. She could stand up right now, thank Osbert for the drink, leave the silver and walk back up the rise and keep going south the way she should have gone to begin with. She could be out of the valley by nightfall. Whatever is happening here, it is not her problem. She did not cause it. She cannot be blamed for it, at least not yet. She has not been here long enough for anything to die in her place. She should leave. Across the room, the woman with the book is still watching her. The Ashwalker meets her eyes. "You're a healer," the Ashwalker says to her. "I am," the woman says. Her voice is unhurried, measured, the voice of someone who has learned that most emergencies are better handled slowly. "Have you seen anything like this before?" The healer closes her book carefully, as though the action requires deliberation. "Not exactly like this," she says, "but similar enough that I have a theory. And I've been trying to convince Osbert to let me go test the theory," she says, with a sideways look at the tavern keeper that contains entire volumes of frustration. "For the past 2 weeks. The road is blocked," Osbert says, and it sounds like something he has said many times. "The East Road isn't blocked," the healer says, and it sounds like something she has said equally many times. "The East Road goes up into the Greyvale Woods, and the Greyvale Woods is where I need to go, and I am not a fragile woman, Osbert. I have been walking those woods for 30 years. Alone," Osbert says, "in this winter, after what happened to the Aldrin boy." The healer opens her mouth, closes it. The argument is an old one, and they have reached the part of it where neither of them has anything new to say. The Ashwalker sets down her cup. "Tell me about your theory," she says to the healer. The healer's name is Maren. She has lived in Varenholm for 31 years, which is longer than most of the other inhabitants, and she knows the Greyvale Woods the way people know things they have both loved and been humbled by, with intimacy and respect, and an accurate accounting of the ways in which the loved thing is also dangerous. She explains her theory to the Ashwalker at the window table while the fire crackles and the other inhabitants of the Barrow Sign pretend not to listen, and very obviously listen. "There is a place," Maren says, "in the deep grey vale. She calls it the Still Place. She has passed near it many times but never entered it, because the Still Place is the kind of location that old woods accumulate over long years, a convergence of something, a knot in whatever invisible web runs beneath the surface of the world. In Maren's experience, these places are usually neutral. Occasionally they are useful. Certain plants grow near them. Certain remedies are stronger when mixed with water drawn from within their boundaries. Occasionally they are doors. Doors to what? The Ashwalker asks. Maren considers. To whatever wants to come through, she says. The Ashwalker thinks about this. She thinks about a cold that has opinions, a winter that arrived overnight and has not moved. 3 people who simply stopped, like fires gone out in a closed room. Something came through, she says. Something came through, Maren agrees, or something woke up that was already there. Either way, it's in the Still Place, or near it, and it's feeding on the village. And you want to go to it? I want to close the door, Maren says, or at least understand what I'm dealing with. There are old methods. I'm a healer, not a mage. But I've read enough of the old books to know that things like this. She stops, glances at the room, lowers her voice slightly. Things like this are not always indestructible. Sometimes they can be redirected, persuaded, almost, if you know the right approach. And sometimes they can't, the Ashwalker says. And sometimes they can't, Maren agrees. They look at each other across the table. You need someone to go with you, the Ashwalker says. I need someone who can't be killed by the cold, Marin says. The Ashwalker is very still for a moment. You know what I am. I know what the ash mark on your wrist means, Marin says quietly. I've seen it in a very old book. An older book than most people in this region know exists. The Ashwalker looks down at her left wrist, where the mark is. A small, pale marking that looks almost like a burn scar if you don't know what you're looking at. She has had it for 200 years. She has shown it to perhaps a dozen people in that time, always by accident. I'm not a weapon, she says. I'm not looking for one, Marin says. I need a companion. I need someone steady. I need someone who won't panic when things get frightening. And you. A slight pause, something close to warmth in her voice. You have clearly been frightening things for a very long time. The Ashwalker almost smiles. It is the near miss of a smile, the ghost of one, the shape that a smile leaves behind. If something dies in my place, she says, while we're in those woods. I know the risk, Marin says. I am the one asking you to take it with me. I'm not asking you to take it alone. This is, the Ashwalker realizes, almost never what people say to her. Usually what people say is, stay away from us, go somewhere else, take your curse elsewhere. We don't want what follows you. Marin is saying, come with me, knowing what follows you, and we will see what we can do together. She picks up her cup, finds it empty. We leave at first light, she says. She does not sleep. She does not sleep often. 200 years of near-death experiences have restructured her relationship with unconsciousness. Sleep requires surrender, and surrender requires trust. And trust is a resource she has learned to budget very carefully. But she rests. She finds a pallet in the corner of the tavern that Osbert offers without much grace and considerable practical decency, and she lies on it with her coat over her like a blanket, and she lets her body be horizontal, which is different from sleep but is what she has. The fire burns low, the others drift off, the old men to a back room, the 3 young men to their homes, the girl to wherever she comes from. Osbert banks the fire with the practiced efficiency of a man who has done it 10,000 times and goes upstairs. Marin reads for another hour by the firelight, then closes her book and sits in the quiet with her eyes open, which is also not sleep, but it is something close to rest. And the Ashwalker watches her do this from across the dark room and thinks about what it means that this woman is not afraid of her. She should be afraid of her. Everybody is afraid of her, eventually. The ones who start out brave become afraid when they see the pattern, when they notice that things die around her, when they start keeping count. She keeps count. 213 years of near deaths averted to the world around her. She has tried over the decades to minimize it, to avoid danger not out of self-preservation, but out of preservation of everything else. She has become very careful, very deliberate. She takes no unnecessary risks. She eats slowly and walks on flat ground and does not stand near cliff edges and avoids brawls and does not go places where the ceiling might fall on her. And still, things die. Because she cannot control it entirely. Because the world is not a controlled environment. Because sometimes ice is slippery, and sometimes horses startle, and sometimes a fever comes in the night and her body simply takes the fever and tosses it somewhere else, into someone who cannot afford to receive it. It is not cruelty. She knows it is not cruelty. But knowing something is not the same as feeling it, and she has felt like a curse for so long that the feeling has become structural, the way Osbert's worried jaw is structural, the way grief builds itself into you until it becomes part of your posture. She turns on her side and looks at the embers of the fire. The cold outside is audible, a low pressing sound, the kind that isn't quite a sound but is what sound would be if sound were made of temperature. The wind moves against the building, and the building holds, but barely, the way Varenholm itself is holding, barely. She thinks about the Aldrin boy, 14, sitting against a tree in the frost, just stopped. She thinks about Osbert's wife, 44 years old and healthy, and then not. She thinks about her mother. She tries not to think about her mother very often. Her mother has been dead for almost 200 years, and the mathematics of grief at this distance are strange and particular. The loss is ancient, processed, reduced to something she can carry without buckling. But she still thinks about her. On nights like this, in rooms where others are sleeping and she is not, in the low hours before dawn when the mind goes to its oldest material. Her mother had held her hands and looked at her at the end, when they both knew it was the end, and said something that the Ashwalker has been carrying ever since. She had said, "You didn't do this to me." She had said it because she knew her daughter would blame herself. She had been right. The Ashwalker had nodded and held her hands and said nothing, because there were no words that were adequate, and she already knew, even then, that silence was sometimes the most honest response. Her mother died, and the Ashwalker had expected to follow. She had already been dying of the same sickness, had been for weeks, had felt her body failing in the slow, deliberate way bodies fail when something has gotten into the lungs and will not be dislodged. She had expected to follow her mother within the month. Instead, the neighbor's goat had died. She had lived. She has not stopped living since. She closes her eyes. She does not sleep, but she lets the thoughts slow, lets the fire's warmth work against the edges of the cold, lets her breath find a rhythm. She rests. She is very tired, being very tired and unable to stop. This is its own kind of life. She has learned to find things in it, not consolation exactly, but texture, something to look at. Across the room, Marin's breathing slows and she sleeps. Finally, her chin dipping, the book still in her lap. The Ashwalker watches her sleep and thinks, one person who is not afraid of me. That is something. First light comes in slowly. The way winter light comes in, reluctantly, like something being dragged. The sky goes from black to grey to a dim, pearlescent pale that is as bright as it is going to get. The snow on the ground reflects it back up, and the whole world exists in a sourceless illumination, shadowless and flat and very cold. They leave before most of the village is awake. Maren carries a pack with her medical kit, several sealed jars, dried herbs, a compass, and the old book she had been reading. A thin volume with a cover worn soft as cloth, the title obscured by decades of handling. She wears her coat over 3 layers of wool and moves with the practiced ease of someone who's been walking difficult terrain in difficult conditions for most of her life. The East Road is not much of a road. It is a track, really, the kind maintained by habitual use rather than official designation. In summer, Maren says, it is clear enough. Now it is 2 ruts in the snow, the ruts left by someone's cart in autumn and then frozen in place, so they walk in the grooves like rails which is oddly comforting in a landscape that otherwise offers no guidance. They walk in silence for the first half hour. The Ashwalker has become, over 2 centuries, a connoisseur of different kinds of silence. There is the hostile silence that people surround her with when they know what she is. There is the frightened silence, the suspicious silence, the mournful silence of people who are waiting for her to leave. This silence is none of those. This is the silence of 2 people who are comfortable enough in each other's presence to not require noise. It is a surprisingly peaceful thing to walk inside. Maren speaks first, eventually. How long? The Ashwalker knows what she's asking. 211 years, give or take. Give or take. A pause. Do you remember the beginning? I remember everything, she says. It is not said with pride. It is said the way you describe a condition. That must be. Maren considers her words carefully. A great deal to carry. It is what it is, the Ashwalker says. The track curves north, and they follow it. The trees on either side grow denser, the pine giving way to the pale-barked ash trees she noticed yesterday, and then to something older and wider, canopied. The branches interlocked overhead so thoroughly that the snow has not penetrated, and they walk for a stretch on bare, frozen ground in a cathedral of dark wood and sky. Do you want to die? Maren asks. It is not a cruel question. It is asked with the careful directness of a healer, the kind of person who has learned that the hard questions are usually the necessary ones, that going around them costs more than going through. Yes, the Ashwalker says. She does not say it with anguish. She says it the way you say a fact about yourself, that you have made peace with not being able to change. Not today, not dramatically, but yes, I would like to be done. I'm sorry, Maren says. People usually say there must be a reason, some purpose, something I'm still here to do. People say that because it makes them feel better about other people suffering, Maren says. The Ashwalker looks at her. Yes, she says, that's exactly right. They walk. The cold deepens as they go north and east. Not in the way cold deepens when you go into shade or away from shelter. It deepens in the purposeful way, the intentional way, the way she noticed on the road into the valley. There is something ahead of them that is making this cold, and they are walking toward it, and the cold is getting louder, if cold could be loud, more present, more intent. She notices other things too. The birds are wrong, not absent. There are birds. She can hear them, but they are not singing. Birds in winter do not sing much, but they make sounds, the functional sounds of movement and alarm and communication. These birds make no sounds. They are in the trees, she can see them, dark shapes motionless on dark branches, and they watch the 2 women walk below them with an attention that is not bird-like. She tells Maren. Maren looks up, nods. I see them. When did this start in the woods? The birds have been wrong for weeks, Maren says. Since early in the 10th month. She glances sideways. They were the first thing I noticed, before the deaths, before the snow got strange. The birds went quiet and I thought, something has changed. You were right. I am often right, Maren says without particular satisfaction. Being right about bad things is a very specific kind of gift. I know it well, the Ashwalker says. They find the still place in the late morning. It is not marked. There is no boundary visible, no change in the trees, no physical threshold that you could point to and say, here is where it begins. But she feels it. She has lived 200 years with a supernatural condition stitched into her, and she has developed over those years a sensitivity to the things that exist outside the ordinary, not power, not skill, just the accumulation of exposure. She has been near enough to the edges of the world's strangeness, often enough to recognize it by its texture. The still place has a texture like held breath. The air changes, not in temperature. It is no colder here than it has been for the last hour of walking, which is to say, it is very cold indeed. But the quality of the air is different, denser almost, like something is pressing outward from a central point, a slow and constant pressure that is not wind. The trees here are the oldest she has seen. Their trunks are wide and pale, and their bark has a quality that is almost scaled, the way old bark sometimes looks, and they stand farther apart from each other than trees usually do, as though they have been giving something in their center a wide berth for a very long time. At the center, there is a clearing, and in the clearing, there is a pool. Or, what was a pool? It is frozen now. Frozen solid, black ice, the kind of ice that is black because what is beneath it is so deep that no light reaches the bottom. The surface is perfectly smooth, no snow on it, no debris, as if whatever is here clears it constantly, keeps it clean, keeps it visible. They stand at the tree line and look at it. That's not natural ice, the ashwalker says. No, Marin says, it isn't. Something is under it. She can feel it, not with her eyes, which see only ice, but with that same accumulated sense, that 2-century familiarity with the edges of normal. Something under the ice is aware of them, has been aware of them since they entered the still place, is looking up at them through 20 feet of frozen black water and regarding them with an attention that is old and cold and patient. Maren opens her pack and takes out one of the sealed jars. She opens it and the smell is immediate. Something pungent and herbal and deeply unpleasant. The kind of smell that makes the eyes water. What is that? The ashwalker asks. Bitter ash resin, dried nightbell flower, and rendered fat from a bear's kidney, Marin says, pulling on a pair of thin gloves before she handles the jar. According to the old text, things that feed on warmth are repelled by certain. She pauses, looking for the right word. Combinations. The logic, as best I understand it, is that they are attracted to warmth and life, and these compounds smell enough like rot and cold that it confuses their attention. You want to repel it. I want to confuse it long enough to do something more permanent. She takes out the book, holds it carefully, one-handed, with a jar in the other. There is a binding described here, not a destruction. I don't think destruction is available to me with what I have. But a binding, a restriction, that might be enough. Might be. I am working with incomplete information in an unprecedented situation, Marin says, with a mild look. If you have a better plan, I am genuinely interested. The ashwalker does not have a better plan. Tell me what you need me to do, she says. Stand between me and the pool, Marin says. If anything comes out of the ice, and it may, I need you to occupy its attention. While you read from the book. While I read from the book. Yes. She looks at the frozen pool, at the darkness beneath the ice, at whatever is looking up at her through it. She thinks about the Aldrin boy sitting against a tree, about Osbert's wife, about the thin ribbons of smoke rising from 2 small fires. She draws her knife. It is, as she noted before, more tool than weapon. It is not adequate against whatever is in that pool. She knows that. She holds it anyway, Because having a knife out is a way of telling yourself and the world that you have made a decision, that you are here on purpose, that you are not simply a victim of the situation. She is here on purpose. She steps into the clearing. The cold hits her like a wall, not the ambient cold of the winter. She's been walking in that for hours and her body has adjusted to it, found its equilibrium. This is the cold at the center of the cold that is generating all the other cold. It hits her chest first and then her face, and then it is everywhere, thorough and total, the kind of cold that is not a temperature but a state, an active removal of heat from everything around it. She keeps walking. Behind her, she can hear Maren beginning to speak, quietly, steadily, in the old formal diction of the binding text, words that are not a language the Ashwalker knows but whose cadence she recognizes as purposeful, as structured, as the spoken form of intention. She stops 6 feet from the edge of the pool. The ice is still, perfectly smooth, the black beneath it very deep. Then it cracks, not explosively, gently, as a spine of ice will crack when the temperature changes rapidly or when something beneath it exerts pressure. A single crack from the center of the pool to the far edge, and then another, branching from the first, and then a fine network of cracks spreading outward like roots, like the map of a river system seen from very far above, covering the surface of the pool in a white web of fracture. And then the surface begins to sink, not break, sink, as though what is beneath it is pulling it down, pulling it open. She tightens her grip on the knife. What comes up from the pool is not a creature exactly. She has seen creatures. She knows what creatures are, things with edges, things with a defined relationship between inside and outside, things whose shape tells you where they end. What comes up from the pool has no edges. It is the cold given form. It is the absence of warmth made visible. It is a thing that is dark in the specific way that dead things are dark. Not shadow, which has a light source, but the dark of something that was once illuminated and no longer is. It rises from the pool slowly, spreads. It is less like a thing rising and more like the pool itself becoming something else, changing states the way water changes states, and in its rising it brings the cold with it, amplified, concentrated. She feels it against her skin, and it is worse than the cold outside. It is the cold of what comes after, the cold of stopped things, and something in it recognizes her. This is the strangest moment. The thing from the pool turns its attention toward her, and in turning its attention toward her, she can feel it assessing her, the way you feel when someone who understands what they are looking at looks at you. It understands what she is. It knows about the curse. It knows that she cannot be stopped the way the others were stopped, and she can feel that it is frustrated, and she can feel something else, that it is also in some way she cannot articulate, curious, interested, the way predators are sometimes, more interested in an unusual prey than in an easy one. Hey, she says to it. She's not sure why she says it. She says it the way you say something to an entity you cannot communicate with because silence feels inadequate, and saying something, anything, is a way of insisting on your own presence. The cold thing shifts. Behind her, Maren's voice gets stronger, more urgent. The cadence of the binding text accelerates, and she can hear Maren moving. The creak of her knees on the frozen ground, the sound of the jar opening, the smell of the bitter ash resin becoming suddenly sharper and stronger as she applies it to the ground. The cold thing reacts to the smell. It pulls back, not a dramatic retreat, not a flight, but a diminishment, a slight contraction, the way something reacts when it encounters a sensation that disorganizes it. The darkness thins at its edges. The cold abates by the smallest fraction. The Ashwalker sees the moment. She steps forward. She steps to the edge of the pool, the cracked, sunken edge of it. And she crouches down, and she puts her bare hand on the black ice at the rim of the pool. And she does not know exactly what she is doing, or what she intends, or whether it will accomplish anything. She only knows that she is the thing that cannot be drained. And if the cold thing wants to try, it can try. She can afford to offer it that. The moment her hand touches the ice, something shifts. The cold thing's attention locks onto her hand with complete and total focus. It tries. She feels it trying, feels the draw of it, the pull of it, something reaching into her through the cold and looking for warmth to take, looking for the life heat that sustains a body. And it finds it, and it pulls, and her curse holds. Whatever pulls at her warmth, the same mechanism that has been deflecting death for 200 years deflects it now. The cold thing takes and takes, and what it takes simply goes somewhere else. The way it always does, redirected by whatever force is stitched into her, passed off to some other point in the fabric of the world. She holds on. Maren reads. The cold thing is fully focused on the Ashwalker's hand, on this inexhaustible source that should be draining and is not. And Maren reads, and the words of the binding text fall into the still place like stones into water, and the Ashwalker holds on and holds on and holds on. The cold thing begins to shake. She can feel it in the ice beneath her hand, a trembling, a vibration that is not temperature, but something else, the vibration of something that is being constrained. The words Maren is reading are doing something. They are not destroying it, she had said. There is no destruction available, but they are drawing a wall around it, a border, a limit. They are telling it in the language of old intention that this is as far as it goes. Here, this pool, this space, no further. The still place is earning its name. And then Maren says the last word of the binding, and the Ashwalker feels the cold thing go still beneath her hand, and the crack in the ice seals itself closed, and the thing beneath the pool settles back into the deep, and the pool is flat and black and smooth again. She lifts her hand. It is unharmed. She looks at it for a moment. Just a hand. Just her hand. She turns it over. The ash mark on her wrist is faintly luminous, which happens occasionally, which she has never been able to fully explain. She stands up. Maren is behind her, on her knees, the book closed in her lap, her face the face of someone who has been through something that required everything they had. Did it work? The Ashwalker asks. I think so, Maren says. I won't know for certain until I see whether the snow shifts, whether the cold eases. She looks up at the sky. But I think so. The Ashwalker looks around the still place. The birds are moving. In the trees above the clearing, the motionless, dark shapes have begun to shift, a rustling, a rearrangement, a small collective reanimation. One of them calls, a single note, clear and brief, and then another answers, and then the sound of birds doing what birds do begins to fill the forest, and it is the most ordinary and beautiful sound she has heard in 3 days. She reaches down and helps Maren to her feet. Thank you, Maren says. Don't, the Ashwalker says. I am going to thank you whether you want me to or not, Maren says, with a firmness that brooks no argument. What you did was... What I did cost me nothing, she says. And then, more honestly, less than nothing. What you did took skill and preparation and courage. What I did took stubbornness. Maren looks at her for a long moment. You are considerably less dramatic than I expected, she says. For a 200-year-old cursed immortal. Dramatics are exhausting, the Ashwalker says. I gave them up around year 50. Something happens in Maren's face. The same thing that almost happened in the Ashwalker's face earlier in the tavern. The near miss of a smile. The shape that warmth leaves behind. They pack up and begin the walk back to Varenholm. The cold changes on the walk back, not dramatically, not in the way of storms breaking or springs arriving, subtly, the way things change when a held tension begins, slowly, to release. The purposefulness goes out of it. The cold is still cold. It is still deep winter, and they are still in a valley that got far more snow than it should have. But it is ordinary cold now. Indifferent cold. Cold that does not have opinions. She notices other things. Birdsong, building gradually as they move away from the still place and back through the old trees. A crack of ice from the direction of the frozen creek. The specific crack that means water is beginning to move beneath the surface. Not melting, not yet, but shifting. The ice asserting less hold than it had. Small things. The kind of small things that only matter if you know what they mean. She tells Maren. Maren listens and nods and says, "Good." They walk. The east track is easier to follow in the returning direction. You can see your own footprints in the snow, can step back into your own marks, and there is something strangely reassuring about that. Evidence that you have been here, that the path you took is real. "Can I ask you something?" Maren says. "You've been asking me things without permission all morning," the Ashwalker says. "I don't know why you're starting to ask now." Fair point. A pause. Do you blame yourself? She does not ask for clarification. She knows what Maren is asking. It is the most central question anyone has ever asked her, and almost no one has thought to ask it. "Yes," she says. "I know I shouldn't. I know intellectually that the curse is not a choice, and that the deaths it causes are not my actions. I know all of that. But," Maren says, "but knowing something and feeling it are different countries," she says. "You can know the road between them and still not always be able to travel it." Maren walks beside her, unhurried. "You've had 200 years to make the journey." "I've had 200 years to know the road very well," she says. "The traveling is its own matter." "Do you think," Maren says carefully, "that you hold on to the blame partly because letting go of it would mean accepting that you have no control over it? That there's nothing you can do?" The Ashwalker is quiet for a moment. "That's a very specific and perceptive thing to say," she says. "I am a healer," Maren says. "A significant part of what I heal is not bodies." She thinks about this for the length of several steps. The frozen creek is audible to their left again, its pressured groan beginning to change pitch, less trapped, more mobile. The cold really is releasing. "Maybe," she says finally, "if it's my fault, then there's an agent. There's something to point to. There's a narrative where the suffering makes sense because I caused it." A pause. "If it's not my fault, then it's just happening. Randomly. To people who don't deserve it. And there's nothing I can do, and there's nothing to understand, and there's no one to hold responsible." "And that's harder," Maren says. "That's much harder," she says. Maren nods and says nothing more, and they walk. This is, the Ashwalker thinks, what a good healer does. Not solve it, not fix it, not offer a remedy, just acknowledge the shape of the wound accurately. Say, yes, I see what that is, and I'm not going to pretend it is smaller than it is. It is, she thinks, one of the most compassionate things anyone has done for her in a very long time. They come out of the grey veil as the sun, pale, low, wintry, has reached its highest point in the sky and has already begun its early descent. The shadow of the hills falls long across the valley, and Varenholm is below them. Smoke rising from its chimneys. More smoke than this morning. Thicker smoke. Warmer smoke, if smoke can be said to have a temperature of quality. The kind of smoke that means fires are burning more confidently. More wood on the hearths. More heat. She notices it and says nothing. And Maren notices it too and says nothing. And they walk down toward the village with this small, unspoken evidence between them. The boy is at the edge of the village again. The same boy, bundled to the eyes, watching from between the buildings. This time, when she raises her hand, he does not disappear. He raises his hand back. Small thing. She files it carefully. The barrow sign is fuller than when they left it this morning. Word has gotten around. The way word always gets around in small, contained places, through walls and along paths and across the specific telephone of people who have nothing to do but watch their neighbors, that the two women who went into the Grey Veil have returned. They came back, which, given what has happened to people who go into the Grey Veil recently, is notable. Osbert is behind his bar. He looks at Maren first, looks at her the way a man looks at a person he's been arguing with for weeks, whom he is relieved to see standing upright. And then he looks at the Ashwalker, and the look is more complicated. Well, he says. Better, Maren says. Not fixed overnight, but better. Osbert's jaw does something complicated. It is the jaw of a man who has been set on stubborn for a long time and is being given information that requires it to consider loosening. The cold, he says. Give it a few days, Maren says. Watch the creek. She sets her pack on the bar. And give us something to eat. We've been in the woods for 4 hours. The girl brings food, actual food. A thick soup, bread, something preserved and fragrant. The Ashwalker sits at the window table and eats slowly, the way she does everything, with a deliberateness born of 200 years of having time for things. The 3 young men from last night are at their table again. They watch her the way young men watch things they have decided are remarkable, with a mixture of wariness and fascination. One of them, the tallest, leans over eventually and says, "Is it true you can't die?" "It's more complicated than that," she says. "But you went into the Grey Veil with her," he says, gesturing at Maren, "after what happened to the Aldrin boy." "Yes," she says, not scared. She considers this. Scared is not the right word. I have a different relationship with danger than most people. She pauses. I don't recommend it. He looks at her for a moment more, then retreats to his table, which is respectful enough. She finishes her soup. The fire in the hearth is burning more brightly than last night. The wood is the same wood. The hearth is the same hearth. But the cold outside is less insistent, and the warmth inside is correspondingly more present, as though they have been in a long negotiation, and the terms have very slightly shifted. Osbert comes to her table later, when the tavern has thinned. He brings 2 cups of something that is neither tea nor broth, nor quite ale. Something herbed and warming and specific to him, to this place, to a recipe that is likely decades old. He sets one in front of her without asking and sits down with the other. They sit for a moment. She's been right about everything, he says. Not an apology exactly, something adjacent. She usually is, I think, the Ashwalker says. I know. He wraps his hands around his cup. It's easier to argue than to let her go into the woods, and he stops. She was my wife's closest friend since they were girls. If I lost her too. She's hard to lose, the Ashwalker says. Something shifts in his face. Not quite a smile. Something worn down but not destroyed. Are you staying? He says. For a while. She looks at him. This is the question she's been moving toward since she walked past the sign at the edge of the village road. And she's been circling it, the way you circle a warm fire from a distance, wanting the warmth but uncertain of the welcome. I shouldn't, she says. The dead woman at the mill, he says. Old Petra. She was 90 years old and had been telling us for 3 years she was ready to go. The Aldrin boy. I've thought about it, and I think whatever was in that pool did that, not anything else. She looks at him. And your wife. He's quiet for a moment. She was sick, he says. In the months before. She didn't tell me how sick. I found out after, from Maren. She had something in her lungs, had had it for months. Maren thinks. He pauses. Maren thinks she might have been close already, and the cold made it faster. She holds her cup and does not say anything. This is not absolution. This is a man who is trying very hard to be fair, to be accurate, in the middle of enormous grief. I'm not saying it wasn't you, he says carefully. I don't know if it was or it wasn't, and I don't think I can know. But I know that you walked into my tavern last night, and this morning you went into the woods, and now the cold is different. And I know what the sign at the road says, and I know what I put there, and I want you to know that the sign is not speaking for me anymore. She looks at him for a long time. He is tired and he is grieving, and he is not entirely comfortable with this conversation, and he is having it anyway, which she has learned to recognize as a particular kind of courage. The kind that does not get called courage because it is quiet. Thank you, she says. He nods, drinks from his cup. Rooms available, proper one, upstairs, no charge. A pause. However long you need it. She does not say she will stay. She does not say she won't. She drinks from her cup. She stays. She tells herself she is staying because the work is not finished, because the binding in the still place needs monitoring, because Maren is watching the weather and the creek and needs someone to go with her if she needs to return. She tells herself this, and it is not entirely untrue. But it is not the whole truth. The whole truth is that she is tired. Not tired in the body. Her body does not tire the way bodies are supposed to tire, does not accumulate the damage of years and cold and effort, does not slow. She is tired in the way that things are tired when they have been resisting for a very long time, tired of moving on, tired of packing the same pack and walking the same kinds of roads away from the same kinds of places, tired of being looked at with the same progression of eyes, curious, then wary, then afraid, then hostile. These eyes are different, still cautious, still watching, but different. She learns the village in 3 days. She learns it the way she has learned many places over the centuries, methodically, quietly, without announcement, through observation and small conversation and the particular kind of attention that 200 years of solitude has made her very good at. The boy's name is Thomas. He is 9, not 10, and he lives with his grandmother at the far end of the main path because his parents went south 2 years ago for work and have not come back. His grandmother is a woman of 70 who looks at the ashwalker with steady ancient eyes that have seen enough of the world's strangeness to have placed it in a larger category of things that are and simply accommodated it. Tomas follows the ashwalker from a respectful distance for the first day. On the second day, he falls into step beside her and says, with the directness of children who have not yet learned to avoid the central question, "Does it hurt when something dies?" "No," she says. "I don't feel it." "Does that make it worse?" he says. She thinks about this. 9 years old, she thinks. 9 years old and already asking the real questions. "Yes," she says. "I think it does." He nods as if this answers something he was trying to work out. And then he says, "I have a cat that came back. My cat went out one night and didn't come back for a week, and we thought it was dead, and then it came back." He pauses. "I was really happy, and I felt bad about being happy because of what might have been keeping it alive in the forest. But I was still happy." She looks at him. The happiness and the bad feeling can both be real at the same time, she says. "My grandma says that," he says. "Your grandma is right," she says. He goes home for supper, and she stands in the main path of Varenholm in the late afternoon light and watches the shadows of the buildings stretch long across the snow and thinks about what it means to be told by a 9-year-old that the happiness of a thing's survival can coexist with grief for what that survival costs. She has been told this before. She has told herself this before. It is never quite settled. She wonders if it is settling now. She shovels snow. This is not a profound activity. Varenholm has too much snow and not enough people with the energy to move it. And she has nothing but energy and time and a body that does not tire. She borrows a shovel from the pile behind the tavern, and she spends an entire afternoon moving snow from the path between the mill and the well, and the people of Varenholm watch her do it from their windows, and eventually a few of them come out and work beside her, not because they trust her entirely, because the path needed clearing and she was clearing it. This is enough. This is, in the moral accounting of small communities, sufficient basis for a provisional working relationship. She does not talk much while she works. She has never been a person who fills silence with noise, but the people around her talk to each other about the cold, about the creek, which has been making hopeful sounds, about old Petra's brother who is coming from Durnwall when the road clears and will want to know about the winter, about the Aldrin boy's mother who has not come out of her house in 3 weeks and whose fire is kept lit by the 3 young men from the tavern who take turns bringing her wood. She listens to all of it. She files it away in the place where she keeps everything. The accumulated record of lives she has moved through, 200 years of other people's stories. It is the largest library she has. On the 3rd evening, Maren comes to find her. She is sitting on the covered porch of the tavern, where the firewood is stacked to the roof line. In the cold, that is no longer purposeful cold, just winter cold, ordinary and bearable. The sun has gone down, and the sky is very clear, and the stars are the bright, hard stars of deep winter, and she is looking at them the way she sometimes looks at things that have been the same for 2 100 years. Marin sits beside her. They sit for a while without talking. The creek moved today, Marin says eventually. A full section of ice broke loose near the mill. I heard it, the ashwalker says. I think the binding held, Marin says. I think whatever was in that pool is still in that pool, and I think it will stay there. A pause. I won't say I'm certain. I don't have enough experience with bindings of this kind to be certain, but I believe it. Good, the ashwalker says. The stars are very still. The cold is very present, but it is just cold now, just weather, the world returning to its ordinary relationship with winter. You're going to leave, Marin says. It is not a question. I always leave, the ashwalker says. I know. Marin is quiet for a moment. I want to say something to you that I've been thinking about for 3 days, and I want you to receive it without deflecting it immediately, which is your habit and which I understand, but which I am asking you to set aside for a moment. The ashwalker looks at her. All right, she says. You are not the curse, Marin says. You carry it, you endure it, but you are not it. The thing that takes life in your place is not you. It is something that was done to you, something that is happening through you, something you did not choose and cannot stop. You are the person it is happening to, not the person doing the taking. She pauses. And the work that you do with this life that you cannot end, the shoveling of snow and the walking into dark places and the giving of your hand to the cold so that other people do not have to, that is also you. That is also what you are. The ashwalker is very still. The stars do not move. I have been told things like this before, she says carefully. I know, Marin says, and I am not asking you to believe it immediately or completely or forever. I am only asking you to let it exist alongside the other things. The way your young friend Thomas lets the happiness of his cat exist alongside the grief of what it might have cost. She's quiet for a long time. The tavern behind them makes small sounds. The fire, a voice, the creak of the building adjusting to the cold. The village around them makes its small sounds too. A door, a dog, the creak of the snow. I never know, she says finally, whether staying makes things worse. I know, Marin says. That is the right question to sit with, not the wrong one. A pause. The wrong question is whether you deserve to stay. She looks at Marin. You've thought about this a great deal, she says. I have had 3 days, Marin says, and a limited social life, owing to the winter. She almost smiles. The near miss, the ghost. 1 more day, she says. I'll stay 1 more day. 1 more day, Marin agrees. She wakes before dawn, not from a dream. She does not dream, or if she does not remember it, the dream sliding away from her in the moment of waking like water off stone. She simply opens her eyes in the dark of the small room above the tavern, in the bed with the rough spun sheets and the heavy quilt that smells of cedar and old wool, and she knows it is time to be awake. She lies still for a moment and does the thing she does every morning. She takes an accounting, not of what has died. She cannot know that, not specifically, not from a distance, but she takes an accounting of herself, of what she is and where she is and what has happened, in the way that people who have been through a great deal learn to do, gently and honestly, without flinching. She is in a village called Varenholm. She has been here 4 days. In those 4 days, the cold has eased and the creek has moved and a section of ice has broken at the mill and the birds are singing in the grey vale again. In those 4 days, a boy named Thomas has told her something she needed to hear. A healer named Maren has said something she is still carrying. An innkeeper named Osbert has taken down the metaphorical sign and replaced it with a cup of something warming and a room upstairs. She thinks about the still place and the dark pool and the binding that Maren made and the cold thing sealed back beneath its ice. She thinks about her hand on the black ice, the offering of it, the drawing out of the cold thing's attention, the strange moment of mutual recognition between two things that cannot die. She thinks about her mother. She holds her left wrist up in the dark and looks at the ash mark, which is faint and pale in the absence of light, but is there, is always there, the mark of what she is, what she carries, what she has been for 200 years. She puts her arm down. She gets up. She dresses in the dark, the familiar layering of wool and leather and the worn soft cloak, and she packs her pack, which takes very little time because she travels light, because she always travels light. She stands with the packed pack in the middle of the small room, and she thinks about leaving, and she thinks about one more day, and she thinks about these two things as though they are different, and they are not entirely different, and she is honest with herself about that. She goes downstairs. The fire is banked to coals, and the tavern is empty, and the dawn is coming. She does not wake Osbert. She goes to the kitchen and finds what there is: yesterday's bread and some cheese and an apple that is kept well in the cold. And she makes breakfast without fuss, the way she does things, and she sits at the window table in the pre-dawn grey and eats it. The window shows her the main path of Varenholm. The snow has settled overnight, still deep, still extensive, but the light looks different on it. The morning light, very early, has a quality that is not the pewter light of the unnatural winter. It has the quality of an ordinary morning in an ordinary winter, the kind where the sun will come up properly and there will be a few hours of pale warmth and things will be the way things are supposed to be. She finishes her breakfast. She thinks about packing her pack more carefully, about the road south, about Durnwall and whatever lies beyond it, about the next cold valley and the next difficult village and the next person who will initially not want her there. She thinks about Maren's voice saying, "You are not the curse." She thinks about Thomas raising his hand. She puts her pack down, not permanently. She is not a person who does things permanently. Permanence is a word for people who plan to stay in one place, and she is not that person, and she is honest with herself about that too. But she puts the pack down, and she waits for the morning to come and for the village to wake and for whatever is next to arrive. What comes next is this. The creek breaks fully at mid-morning. A long groan, and then a crack, and then the sound of water moving properly beneath its ice, the life of it restored. And Thomas runs along the bank, watching the ice chunks float and making the noise that children make when something tremendous happens that does not need to be explained. What comes next is Osbert coming down the stairs and finding her sitting at the window table and saying, without preamble, that there is more soup if she wants it. She wants it. What comes next is Maren arriving with a satisfied expression and a look at the quality of light and the sound of the creek and saying, quietly, that she believes it is done, that the binding held, that what was in the pool is in the pool and will stay in the pool. What comes next is 3 of the older inhabitants of Varenholm stopping her on the main path to ask about her travels, not with the wariness of before, not with the keeping of distance, but with genuine curiosity, the kind that small, contained communities develop when someone unusual comes through and turns out to be less dangerous than advertised. She tells them about Calver's Crossing, about the High Pass Road in autumn, about the monastery north of the Grey Vale, which she has not visited but has passed, and whose bells she heard from the road, 7 bells, which is unusual. They tell her about Varenholm, about the summer, which is apparently extraordinary. The valley transforms, wild flowers up the hillsides, the creek wide and clean, the ash trees in the Grey Vale turning a remarkable silver green, about the harvest festival, which has not been what it should be for 3 years now, but which the oldest of the 3 says firmly will be restored next year. She listens. She files it away. In the archive of 200 years, the file that is labeled Varenholm is being written, and it is not a small file. It is more than she expected. She leaves on the 5th morning. She had said 1 more day, and then she had stayed another day after that, and then another, which is as much as she can allow herself. Not because anything has gone wrong. Nothing has gone wrong. The cold is ordinary. The birds are singing. The creek is moving. Osbert's jaw has unclenched by perhaps 2 degrees, which for Osbert is significant. She leaves because she always leaves, and because that is true, and because the honest thing to do with a true thing is to act on it rather than to pretend it might not be. She packs the pack in the early morning dark, and she goes downstairs, and Osbert is already up, which is either because he rises early or because he knew she was going, and he has something hot in a cup waiting for her and a cloth package of food for the road. She takes them. He nods. She nods. This is sufficient for both of them. Maren is outside, waiting. The ashwalker stops when she sees her. You didn't have to. I know, Maren says. I wanted to. They walk together to the edge of the village, to the post where the sign is, the sign that says travellers. We cannot offer hospitality. Continue on. Maren reaches up and takes the sign off the post. She holds it for a moment, looking at it. Then she sets it against the post rather than on it. Not destroyed, not discarded, just set aside. Available if needed again, no longer in use. Travel well, Maren says. I always do, the ashwalker says, and then, thank you for what you said. Did it help? She thinks about this honestly. I don't know yet, she says. I think it might, eventually. It takes me a long time. You have a long time, Maren says. I do, she says. I have a very long time. She turns and walks up the rise. At the top of the rise, she stops and looks back at Varenholm below her. The smoke from the chimneys, thicker and more confident than when she arrived. The paths cleared of snow, the creek glinting where the ice has moved. The mill turning slowly, not fully, not with its summer vigor, but turning, working. Tomas is standing at the edge of the village, watching her from between 2 buildings. She raises her hand. He raises his hand. She turns south. She walks. The road south is different than the road she came in on. Not physically. It is the same frost, the same pale barked trees, the same winter sky. The road itself is unchanged. She's changed, very slightly. She notices it in the way she is walking. She walks a great deal. More walking than most people in the history of the world. She thinks sometimes with a dark humor that is hers alone. And she knows her own gait the way a musician knows the weight of their instrument. She knows when she is walking with resistance and when she is walking without it. She is walking with slightly less resistance than before. Not none. She is not the kind of person, not the kind of thing that achieves none. 200 years has given her an accurate reckoning of what is possible and what is not, and she does not confuse the two, but slightly less. She thinks about what Maren said. She thinks about Thomas's cat. She thinks about the cold thing beneath the ice of the still place, sealed but not destroyed, contained but present, and she thinks that this is perhaps a reasonable description of certain things that one must live with, not resolved, not gone, but bounded, given a limit, held to its pool. She has carried her guilt for 200 years without a limit. Maybe, she thinks, a limit is possible. Not today, not suddenly, not in the way of dramatic transformations that only happen in stories, but possibly, eventually, over time. She has a great deal of time. The road crests a rise, a different rise from the one that showed her Varenholm, higher, wider, with a view of the whole valley below. She stops and looks. From here, the valley is beautiful. She can see the whole of it, the hills on either side, the grey vale dark and silver to the east, the creek glinting along the valley floor, and Varenholm at its centre, small and clustered and sending up its smoke into the pale winter air. The smoke rises straight up. No wind. The cold is still. She watches the smoke for a moment, the slow, unhurried rise of it, the warmth of it carrying upward into the cold air and spreading, dissipating, becoming part of the general sky. She turns south. She walks. The road south widens as it moves away from the valley. This is the nature of roads. They begin as tracks and become paths and become roads as more feet and more carts and more purposes press them into the earth. The track that connects Varenholm to the rest of the world starts narrow, barely a thought in the snow, and gradually asserts itself as something more intentional. By midday, she is walking on something that could properly be called a road, with wheel ruts visible beneath the frost and the occasional marker post, and once a wayside shrine, a small stone alcove, roofless and weathered, with a bowl inside it that holds some dried berries and a copper coin. Someone was here before her, not long ago. Travelers leave offerings at wayside shrines for many reasons. Gratitude for safe passage, prayers for what is ahead. The older, less articulated impulse to acknowledge the world's indifference by placing something small and deliberate inside it. She passes shrines like this throughout the year, throughout the decades, the centuries, and she has never left an offering at one. She has thought about it. She's not certain what she would be offering to or asking for. Today, she stops. She looks at the shrine for a long moment. She reaches into her coat and finds a coin, a small one, bronze, worn nearly smooth, the face on it from a kingdom that no longer exists. She has carried it for 60 years. She has no particular attachment to it. It is simply a coin she has had and has been meaning to set down somewhere. She sets it in the bowl beside the dried berries. She's not sure what she means by it. She does not require herself to know. Some things are done before they are understood. She walks on. The sky above the road is beginning to change, the flat pewter white of the deep valley winter giving way at its edges to something with more color. Not blue, not yet, but the promise of blue, the direction of blue, the suggestion that above this layer of cloud there is a sky that remembers what a proper color looks like. She watches it while she walks, which is something she has learned to do. Watch multiple things at once, divide her attention between the road and the sky and the tree line and the quality of the cold. It is the attention of someone who has had to keep themselves alive in an unusual way for a very long time. Not alive in the physical sense. Her body manages that without her help, she has learned, to an almost insulting degree. Alive in the sense of present, engaged, maintaining the habit of caring about the world that passes around her. This is harder than it sounds. 200 years is a long time to maintain engagement. She has gone through periods, decades, once, that frightened her when she looked back on them, where the caring simply wasn't there, where she moved through the world like weather moves through a valley, automatic and indifferent, going where the gradients pushed her without intention or preference, where the people she encountered were shapes rather than people, problems rather than presences. She came back from those periods slowly, imperfectly, without drama. The caring returned the way warmth returns to cold hands, gradually, with discomfort, with the specific pins and needles sensation of circulation being restored. She thinks, walking south, that she is in a restored period now, that Varenholm did something for her circulation. She is glad she walked past the sign. The road begins to climb by mid-afternoon. She had not realized how deeply the valley sat until she begins to climb out of it. The road tilting upward gradually, the trees thinning on either side, and then a stretch of open hillside where the wind has full access and uses it. She leans into the wind. It is very cold, but it is wind cold, natural, sourceless, the kind that the world generates simply by existing, with its pressures and its temperatures and its roots between geographical features. She has always liked wind. It is the most democratic weather. It reaches everything. At the top of the climb, the road levels and she can see ahead, down a long sloping descent into a wider valley than the one she left, darker with agricultural fields and heavier with the marks of habitation. A town, Durnwall most likely, the town Osbert had mentioned. 12 miles, he had said. She's perhaps halfway. She stops and eats from the cloth package Osbert gave her, bread and a hard cheese and something pickled that she cannot identify but which is warming in the way that salt and acid are warming, activating something in the body's memory of flavor. She eats standing up, looking at the landscape. This is something she does. People who eat alone tend to develop postures and habits around solitary eating. She has tried them all over 200 years, eating seated, eating walking, eating quickly to reduce the exposure of the activity, eating slowly to extend it. She eats standing up now, facing whatever direction is interesting, because the view is almost always the best thing about a meal when you eat alone, and ignoring a view to stare at a bowl seems like an ungrateful approach to the world. The view today is the descending road and the wider valley and the smudge of Durnwall in the middle distance and the pale winter sky above all of it, beginning, very tentatively, to show something closer to color. She finishes the food. She folds the cloth carefully and puts it in her pack, because cloth is useful and she has been folding cloths carefully and putting them in her pack for 200 years. She descends toward Durnwall. Durnwall is larger than Varenholm by a factor of perhaps 5. It has a market square, currently mostly empty and snow-covered, with a covered well at its center and the specific geometry of a space designed for collective gathering that only comes to life in the warm months. There are several taverns, she counts 3 from the main road, and a chapel house larger than Varenholm's, and a guild hall with a crest above the door that she does not recognize, which means it is either new or provincial. She does not intend to stay. She has learned over many years the difference between places she will stay and places she will pass through. Durnwall is a passing through place, not because it is unwelcoming or hostile, but because it is not asking her anything. A place only keeps you if it is asking you something, and Durnwall is not. She is looking for a specific thing. She needs to resole her right boot, which has been wearing thin at the heel for longer than she has been willing to address it, and Varenholm had no cobbler. She finds one on a side street off the market square. An old man with a workshop that smells of leather and wax and something chemical and familiar that she has smelled in 100 workshops over 100 years, and which she associates genuinely with the concept of things being repaired rather than replaced. The cobbler looks at her boot. He turns it over. He presses the heel with a thumb. 3 days, he says. I need to leave tomorrow, she says. He looks at her. He looks at the boot. He performs the silent calculation of a craftsman weighing his standards against the practical needs of a customer. Tomorrow evening, he says, in the tone of a man making a concession he will remember. I'll pay in advance, she says, and she names a price that is more than fair, and he nods, and she leaves the boot and goes back to the market square in the one boot and one thick wool sock, which is an indignity she has endured before. She finds a tavern, not the largest, not the most crowded, a middle-sized one, the kind that has been here for decades and knows it and doesn't particularly need to advertise. She gets a room and she gets a meal and she sits in the corner of the common room where she can see the door and she reads. She does not always have reading material. When she does, she reads with the hunger of someone who has learned that books are the best companions. They do not become afraid of you. They do not die in your place. They do not eventually leave or tell you to leave. They simply continue to be there on whatever terms you can manage. The book is a thin one she picked up in a market 2 towns ago, a practical text on land management in river valleys, which sounds dull and is, in fact, occasionally dull, but which also contains within its practical chapters a recurring attentiveness to the way water behaves when conditions change that she finds genuinely beautiful. The author, unnamed, unusual, writes about rivers the way poets write about rivers, except with the added credibility of someone who has actually measured them. She reads until the common room thins. She sleeps. Properly this time. She sleeps properly, which does not happen always, which happens in particular conditions that she has never been fully able to identify, but which seem to involve a specific quality of exhaustion and safety and warmth in a specific combination. Varenholm, she thinks, gave her something that has made the combination available. She sleeps and does not remember dreaming and wakes in the morning feeling like a person. This is not always how she feels when she wakes. She files it carefully, gratefully. She is waiting for her boot in the late afternoon when she hears the argument. It is not a violent argument, not raised voices, not the furniture-scraping quality of a confrontation about to become physical. It is the argument of 2 people who know each other well and have opposing views and have been having this conversation in various forms for some time. She recognizes it by its rhythm. 2 voices approximately even in volume, approximately even in conviction. The pauses too deliberate to be natural. The pauses of people choosing their words. She is sitting on a bench outside the cobbler's workshop because the workshop is small and the cobbler works without conversation and the bench gets what thin winter sun exists, and she is in no hurry. The argument is coming from the adjacent building, a narrow house, 2 stories, with its shutters open despite the cold. She would not normally listen. She has listened to enough of other people's lives over 200 years to have developed a principled disinterest in the private moments of strangers. But she hears a word that stops her. The word is Grey Veil. She goes still. The voices come more clearly through the open shutters. 2 men, one older, one younger. From the pitch and the particular way, the older voice carries a kind of settled exhaustion, while the younger voice carries a kind of urgent, unfinished energy. The younger voice is saying that someone needs to go and check, that the road has been blocked all winter, that Varenholm hasn't sent word in months, that 3 months of silence from a village of 25 people in a valley with a blocked road is not nothing, and someone needs to find out what is happening. The older voice is saying that the road is blocked for a reason, that you don't send people into blocked roads in deep winter, that when the pass clears they will send someone. The younger voice is saying that by the time the pass clears, if something is wrong. The older voice says, nothing is wrong. It is winter. They are fine. She listens to this, and she thinks about the sign at the edge of Varenholm's road. Travellers, we cannot offer hospitality. Continue on. She thinks about 3 thin streams of smoke from 2 small fires. She thinks about the Aldrin boy sitting against a tree. She stands up. She walks to the door of the adjacent house and knocks. There is a pause in the conversation, then footsteps. The door opens. The older man is perhaps 60, with the posture of someone who holds administrative authority, a town secretary or a guild manager, someone who has learned that the way you stand in a doorway contains information. He looks at her with the moderate suspicion of a man interrupted. Yes, he says. I came from Varenholm this morning, she says. The pause. You. He turns his head. Edric. Over his shoulder, then back to her. Come in. She tells them what she knows. She tells them about the winter and the blocked road and the deaths and the still place and Maren's binding. She tells it plainly, without embellishment, the way she tells things. She has found over the years that plain telling is believed more often than dramatic telling, that the body language of someone who is leaving out the theatrical elements reads as credible in a way that urgency does not. The older man, his name is Councillor Breck, listens with his hands flat on the table, the posture of someone receiving information and attempting to receive it accurately. The younger man, Edric, perhaps 25, with the look of someone who has been right about something for months and is navigating the complicated territory of being vindicated, listens with his hands in his lap and his jaw tight. The binding held, Breck says. As of yesterday morning, she says. The healer there, Maren. She was confident. Maren, Breck says, and says it with the weight of a name he knows. She's been writing to us for 2 months about the Grey Veil. We thought. He stops. You thought she was being excessive, the Ashwalker says. We thought the winter was the winter, Breck says, which is a more honest answer than she expected. Edric says nothing. He is being careful, she can see, about not saying I told you so with his face, which is a restraint that costs him some visible effort. What do you need from Varenholm now? She asks. Supplies, Breck says immediately. If the road clears enough for a cart. The cold has broken, she says. Not spring, still winter, but the purposeful cold is gone. If you send someone to assess the pass in 2 or 3 days, I think they will find it passable. You think, Breck says. I think, she says. I am not an oracle. I am a person who spent 5 days in that valley and knows what I observed. He looks at her for a long moment with the eyes of a man who is deciding how much to trust a stranger. Who are you? He says. A traveler, she says. He waits for more. She does not provide more. He nods, slowly, the nod of a man deciding not to push a particular door. We'll send someone to the pass in 3 days, he says, and if it's possible, send supplies, Edric says, and his voice is very level and even, and send them quickly. Breck looks at his younger colleague. Something passes between them. The complex communication of two people who know each other well and have been disagreeing for months and are in the moment of one of them being right and both of them knowing it. Yes, Breck says. Supplies, quickly. She stands. Good. She goes back to the bench outside the cobbler's workshop and she sits and she waits for her boot and she thinks about how sometimes the useful thing is not the dramatic thing. Sometimes the useful thing is walking into the room next door and saying, I was there, here is what I know. The cobbler brings her boot 20 minutes later. She pulls it on, presses the heel against the cold ground. The resoled heel is firm and even. Good work, she tells him. He accepts this without expression, which is the response of someone who knows the quality of their own work and does not need it confirmed. She pays him. She walks south. She has been on this road, this generalized road, the road of her life, the road of 200 years, long enough to have developed a philosophy about it. She did not intend to develop a philosophy. She is not a philosopher, does not have the temperament for the kind of systematic thinking that philosophy requires, the building of structures, the labeling of rooms, the insistence on consistency between what is said in one part of the framework and what is said in another. But 200 years leaves marks. 200 years of solitude and movement and observation and loss accumulates into something even without intention. The sediment of experience layers itself into strata that can be read if you know how to look, if you are willing to be honest about what you see. What she has learned in 200 years can be roughly organized into 3 categories. The first is, most people are trying. This sounds simple. It is not simple. It took her the better part of a century to really believe it. In the early decades of her curse, she moved through the world with the bitter clarity of someone who sees every fault and every failure and cannot understand why people so consistently make the choices that harm each other. She was not wrong about the faults and failures, but she was wrong about the trying. She was not accounting for how hard the trying is, how much it costs, how often it is invisible precisely because it is imperfect, because a person who is trying and failing or trying and partially succeeding doesn't look as neat as either a success or a villain. Osbert. 3 years of grief and worry compacting his jaw into something structural and still lighting the fire, still serving the soup, still having the imperfect conversation rather than not having it. Maren. 30 years of knowing that the grey veil has a still place and 30 years of walking carefully around it, and when it mattered, not walking carefully at all. Tomas's grandmother. 70 years old, managing a 9-year-old without his parents, watching a winter that is wrong and keeping the fires going, trying. Most people are trying. She had to learn to see it. It changed the way she moved through the world. The second is, The things that hurt you are not necessarily the things that diminish you. She has been hurt. 200 years is a long curriculum in the varieties of human pain. Loss, rejection, isolation, the specific loneliness of being the wrong kind of different, the ongoing accounting of what her survival costs the world. She has been hurt enough and in enough different ways that she would be, in ordinary time, destroyed by it. She is not destroyed. She is, in some ways, she is still learning to acknowledge, formed by it, not made better by suffering. She does not believe in that simple equation, does not believe the world is a kiln that makes you strong through heat. The heat also breaks things. She has seen the breaking. But the hurt has given her a shape, has given her a specific kind of vision, the kind that sees the struggling underneath the surface of other people's presentations, has given her patience, has given her, perhaps most importantly, an accurate sense of proportion about what is catastrophic and what is merely difficult. She knows the difference between catastrophic and difficult in a way that is hard to teach and easy to feel. The third thing, and this is the most recent, the most uncertain, the one she is still working the edges of like a new coin between her fingers. You are allowed to put the pack down, not forever, not in the final, permanent way she has sometimes wanted, but for a night, for 5 days in a valley, for the time it takes to eat a meal standing up, facing a view, for the time it takes to sit on a bench in winter sun and wait for your boot. You are allowed to put the pack down. She is still learning this one. She does not make Durnwall by nightfall, obviously. She left Durnwall this morning, heading further south, and the next settlement is further than a day's walk. She makes camp. She's good at this. She's been making camp for 200 years, and she has refined the process to a science. A fire site in the best available shelter, gathered wood in order of size, a structure that will catch easily and sustain itself. She works quickly and without fuss, and has a fire going within 20 minutes of deciding to stop, and within 30 minutes she is sitting near it with food heating and the night arranged to her satisfaction. The satisfaction of a well-made camp is a small, dependable pleasure. She has learned to trust small, dependable pleasures. The large pleasures are unreliable. They require alignment of conditions that rarely align. The small ones are there when you know to look for them. The fire that catches, the boot that fits properly, the soup that is still warm, the view from a hilltop, the sound of a creek moving, the sound of some 9-year-old boy raising his hand. She eats her camp food, simple, portable, the kind of meal that exists for the purpose of sustenance rather than pleasure. Though she has made peace with that, she feeds wood to the fire in the careful increments of someone who has a finite supply and needs it to last. The night around her is very clear. This far from any settlement, the stars are unconstrained. No light competing with them, nothing diluting them, just a full array of them, the complete catalogue, the sky as it was before settlements and their lights complicated things. She lies back on her bedroll and looks at the stars. She has done this many times. The stars over the centuries are the same stars. They shift, gradually over very long time. She's been alive long enough to notice the drift, the slow rotation of the sky's arrangement, the way constellations travel across the centuries. But it is the same sky, the same stars, the oldest continuity she has. She finds it comforting, not because the stars care about her. They do not. They are burning things at incomprehensible distances, entirely indifferent to everything that occurs in this small valley, on this small world. But because they are the same, because some things are the same, whether she is 23 and dying of lung sickness, or 223 and walking south from a village she helped, the sky is the same. She is still here. These two facts are connected, and she cannot entirely articulate how, but she feels the connection, and she trusts the feeling, because feeling is data, because her body has been keeping records for 200 years, because the accumulated intelligence of 2 centuries of navigation by feeling is not nothing. The fire burns, the night is cold and still, the stars are bright, she sleeps. Part 22. What the road ahead holds, she does not know. This is the honest answer, and she has learned, over 200 years, to prefer honest answers to comfortable ones. She does not know what the road south holds. She does not know if the next place she stops will need her or reject her, or some complicated combination of both. She does not know if the thing she is carrying, the curse, the ash mark, the mechanism of deflected death, will cost someone something in the next week or the next month, or will, through her careful navigation and the luck she never counts on but occasionally receives, leave the world around her undisturbed. She does not know if she will find a place like Varenholm again soon, a place that asks something of her, that holds something she didn't know she needed, that takes the sign down. She does not know, but she is walking, and walking is, in the absence of certainty, the right response. She has learned this too. When you do not know what is ahead, you walk, you stay in motion, you stay engaged. You keep your eyes on the road and your ears on the forest and your hands open, not grasping, just open, available, ready to give what you have to give when the moment arrives that asks for it. She has given her hand to the cold of a frozen pool in a dark forest. She will give it again when the time comes, not because it costs her nothing. It costs her something, even if not in the currency that it would cost someone else. It costs her the exposure, the return of caring, the re-engagement with a world that has also hurt her, the risk, always the risk, that something in the world around her will pay the price for her survival. But it is what she has. It is what she is, the Ashwalker, the one who walks through the ash of everything she survives. It is still the most honest name she has been given. She walks south. The road is long and her boots are good, and the pack on her back contains everything she needs for the next few days. The sky above the road is beginning, finally, in the earliest pre-dawn light, to show color. Not blue yet, but close, the direction of blue, the suggestion of it. She watches it come. This is the hour she loves most. If love is not too strong a word for the relationship a 200-year-old cursed woman can sustain with a time of day, the hour before the light, not full dark. Full dark is its own thing, absolute, complete, a state rather than a transition. The hour before the light is a transition. It is the world holding its breath between what it was and what it is becoming. It is the particular grey that exists only at this moment, that is not the grey of overcast or the grey of pewter sky or the grey of any weather or season. It is the grey of about to be day. She has watched it in more places than she can count. She has watched it in cities, from windows and rooftops and the steps of cathedrals. She has watched it in forests and fields and beside rivers and from the tops of hills. She watched it once from a boat, crossing a sea that no longer goes by the same name, when the world around her was nothing but water going from black to grey and she was somewhere in the middle of that translation. She watches it now from the road, moving south. The birds begin. They always begin in this hour. The first birds, the earliest risers, the ones that seem to feel the light coming before it arrives and respond to the forecast rather than the fact. A few notes, scattered, testing, then more, building gradually into something that is not yet morning chorus, but is the beginning of it. She walks and listens to the birds beginning. She thinks about Varenholm, not with the sharp focus of recent memory, but with the softer focus of something settling into the longer record, finding its place among the 200 years of what she has seen and survived and moved through. Varenholm will be there, in the record. A valley with a blocked road in winter and a strange cold and a healer who read from an old book and a sign that was put aside. A boy who raised his hand. She thinks about what she said to Maren on the porch, one more day, and then she'd stayed another day, and another, and then she had left. This is her pattern. This is as much permanence as she can offer. One more day, and then another, and then the leaving, because the leaving is also true, is also honest, is also what she is. But the days are also what she is. She does not always remember that. She's remembering it now, in the hour before the light, on the road south from a valley that she helped, from a village that put his sign aside. The sky brightens. It goes from the grey of about to be day to the pale colour of actual dawn. Not warm, not the gold of summer dawns, but a winter dawn, thin and clear and real. The road in front of her becomes visible in its details. The frost on the ground, the ruts in the earth, the tree line on either side, dark against the brightening sky. She can see where she's going. She walks. This is the part where we stop. For a while. Not forever. Not the Ashwalker. She keeps going. We'll keep going. We'll be going long after this story ends. Long after the road south reaches its next destination and the next thing asks something of her. She's not the kind of story that stops. But we can rest here. You can rest here. Let the road go on without you, for tonight. Let her walk it. She is good at walking. She has had 200 years of practice, and her boots are resoled, and her pack is balanced on her shoulders, and she knows how to be in motion without being consumed by it. Let her carry the weight tonight. You have been carrying enough. That is the thing about the Ashwalker. The thing that makes her useful in a story like this. At a time like this, she cannot be diminished by carrying. Whatever she carries, it deflects from her, finds somewhere else to go, leaves her standing when standing should be impossible. She can hold it, not your specific pain, not the details of what today was or what this week has been, or what the long accumulation of difficult things has done to the way you move through the world. She cannot hold that for you. That is yours. That belongs to you. And carrying is not always the same as suffering. Sometimes carrying is how we know we have loved. But she can hold the night for a few hours. She is good at nights. 200 years of nights. The kind she lies awake through, and the kind she sleeps through, and the kind she watches from porches, and the kind she spends walking roads that are just bright enough to walk by. She is out on the road, and she is moving, and the dawn is coming, and you can rest. Let your body be heavy. Let the weight of today find the bed, or the couch, or the floor, or wherever you are. Let it arrive there. Let it settle. You do not need to resolve anything tonight. Nothing needs to be fixed before morning. The morning will come on its own. It always does. She carries an archive. She has not always thought of it this way. For most of the first century, the accumulation of memory felt like a burden, the weight of all she had seen, all she had lost, all she had moved through without being moved in the permanent way, without being allowed to stay. 200 years of faces and voices and fires and roads layered on each other, crowding each other, the oldest ones going slightly soft at the edges but never fully gone. At some point in the 2nd century, she cannot identify exactly when, these things don't have clean beginnings, she started thinking of it differently. An archive. Everything that has passed through her life, noted, kept, preserved. She is the keeper of it. She is, by virtue of her strange persistence, the record of 2 centuries of ordinary and extraordinary human activity in the part of the world she has moved through. Things that would otherwise be lost. Not in the grand historical sense, not in the sense of famous events and documented figures, but in the small, human sense, the sense of a miller's dog in Calver's Crossing, of a healer named Marin who reads by firelight with a book worn soft as cloth, of a boy named Thomas who raises his hand. Someone should know about these things. She knows. She is not an archivist by training or by intention. She did not choose this role, but she has performed it unconsciously and then consciously for a long time. And she has come to believe that there is value in it. Not grand historical value, small value. The value of a thing being witnessed, the value of someone saying, "This happened, and I was there, and I remember it." She moves through the world and she witnesses it. She witnesses it because she cannot do anything else, cannot stop, cannot be done, and because in the absence of other purposes, this one has grown in the space where purposes live. But also, and this is newer, this is something she is still working out, because witnessing is a form of care, because to pay attention to a thing is to honor it, because the miller's dog and the healer and the boy with his hand raised and the innkeeper with the tense jaw and the still pool in the dark forest, they are more real for being held in someone's memory. She holds them. She keeps walking. The archive grows. Part 26. The things that are still true. She is still a woman who cannot die. She is still carrying a curse that she did not choose. She is still deflecting death to the edges of her life, and things still die there, and she still cannot control it, and she still cannot know when it will happen, or who it will take, or how to stop it. These things are still true. They do not become untrue because a healer said something kind on a porch. They do not become untrue because a boy raised his hand. They do not become untrue because she stayed 5 days in a valley and helped with something and the creek moved and the birds came back. She knows this. She has been careful over the years about false resolutions, about the seduction of moments that feel like endings, that feel like the curse is lifted or the burden is settled or the 2-century weight has been put down for good. These moments come and they feel real, and they are real in their moment. But the morning after them, she is still the ash walker, still walking, still carrying. What changes is not the curse. What changes is what she does with it. She cannot choose the curse. She can choose to walk past the sign. She can choose to put her hand on the ice. She can choose to knock on the door next to the cobbler and say, "I was there. Here's what I know." She can choose to fold the cloth and put it in her pack and keep moving south with eyes open and hands open and the specific willingness to be useful that is the closest thing she has to a vocation. She can choose one more day and then another and then the leaving, because the leaving is also honest, and then the road, because the road is where she lives. And then the next valley, the next sign, the next pool with something in it, the next person who is not afraid of her. There will be a next one. There always has been. She has 200 years of evidence for this. She walks south. The road is long. She has time. She carries, as she always carries, the pack on her back and the knife at her hip and the ash mark on her wrist and the 200 years of everything she has survived. She carries the memory of her mother's voice. She carries the count. She always carries the count. She carries the knowledge of what she is and the incomplete peace with it and the ongoing work of living inside a condition she did not choose. And now she carries some new things. A cup of something herbed and warming in memory. A 9-year-old boy who raised his hand. A healer named Maren who said, "You are not the curse," and meant it, and said it without flinching and without needing anything back for it. An innkeeper who unclenched his jaw by 2 degrees, which is 2 degrees more than nothing. A village that put its sign aside. A cold thing sealed beneath its ice in a forest where the birds are singing again. Small things. She has been carrying small things for 200 years. She has learned that small things are what the majority of life is made of. She walks south. The road is long. She has time. She does not go back to Varenholm. She tells herself she will someday. In the vague and uncommitted way she has made vague and uncommitted promises to herself for 2 centuries. The kind that are real in their intention and honest in their uncertainty. Someday. Perhaps. But she hears about Varenholm as it happens. Word travels in this part of the world the way water travels. Not in straight lines, not by announcement, but along the path of least resistance. The roads, the markets, the tavern, conversations of traveling merchants and seasonal workers and guild runners who carry messages between settlements. She hears about Varenholm 2 months later, in a town further south, from a merchant who had come up from the valley road after the pass cleared. He describes it the way people describe places they were impressed by, against their expectations. Small place, he says. Valley between 2 hills. Thought it would be nothing. But the creek was running clean, and the fields were being turned for early planting, and there was a mill working and a woman, healer, he thought, by the cord on her wrist, walking the tree line with a boy who could not be more than 10, looking at something in the trees, looking at something in the trees. She imagines Maren and Thomas at the edge of the grey veil. She imagines the birds singing in the old pale-barked ash trees. She imagines the still pool in the clearing, sealed and quiet, the cold thing in its depth, bounded and held. She drinks her cup of something herbed and warm and thinks about a valley waking up from a wrong winter, the ash, trees going silver green the way the old woman described them, Osbert's fires burning more confidently now, the main path cleared and dry, the creek glinting. She witnessed Varenholm. She keeps it. The merchant finishes his description and moves on to other things. Prices, roads, the weather further north. And she listens with half her attention and keeps the other half in a valley 2 months behind her, with a healer and a boy and a creek running clean and the ash trees turning silver green. Someday, she thinks, perhaps. She finishes her cup. She adjusts the pack on her shoulders. She walks, and so she walks on. Our ash walker, not healed, not solved, not absolved, but slightly less alone with it than she was before, carrying something new alongside everything old. That is not nothing. That is, maybe, everything. Take a slow breath in and let it out. You made it through another night, dark heart, and so did she. And that matters. Not because some grand purpose requires it, not because a story demands a hero's resolution, but because you are here, and here is where you are allowed to be, and rest is something you are allowed to have. If today was hard, you don't have to fix it tonight. If this week has been long and heavy and full of things that pressed against you, you don't have to resolve it before you sleep. You just have to put the pack down, just for now, just for tonight, like she did. One more day. Sleep well. You're safe in the shadow. And if this story found something in you tonight, if the Ashwalker's road felt a little like your road, leave a like. It tells me that this kind of story matters, and it helps more dark hearts find their way here. Subscribe if you want to stay. There are more shadows to walk through, more morally grey roads to travel, more complicated, misunderstood characters waiting for their story to be told. They're all waiting for you. Sleep now. You've earned it. She is still walking, somewhere south of a valley called Varenholm, somewhere on a road that is long and cold, and hers, somewhere in the archive of 200 years that is also still being written. She's still walking, and the pack is on her shoulders, and the ash mark is on her wrist, and the birds are singing somewhere in the trees above the road. She will stop again, eventually. She always does. One more day, and the road goes on, and the stars are the same stars, and the world is difficult and worth witnessing, and she witnesses it, one day at a time, one village at a time, one hand on the ice at a time. Dark hearts, rest now. She has the road tonight.